The elder gods watched what had happened in their world, and their hearts filled with sadness and resentment. They knew that if they didn't act quickly, Tibia would be destined to become a tomb. However, some of the oldest races on Tibia, such as the elves and dwarfs, managed to survive. The dwarfs, a race of talented miners and blacksmiths of the mountain halls. Brave fighters who served their creators in the gods' war, though inevitably, they also had to give in to the vicious power of their enemies, and only by fleeing to safe places of refuge did they manage to survive. However, their true origins are one of the biggest hidden secrets in the world of Tibia. Their treasures and the powerful weapons they once forged are still hidden beneath the highest mountains and deepest caves, waiting for the right warrior to be the bearer of light or darkness.
In the early years of the war, the gods decided to create 17 firstborn dwarfs, including male and female dwarfs. They would be in charge of leaving descendants of their race, developing their philosophy and magic based on the art of fire and earth. Among these 17 dwarfs, one of them differed from his brothers. It is said that he was a messenger of the gods due to his exceptional characteristics. His name was Durin, a dwarf leader and virtuous in many ways. Unlike the other 16 dwarfs, Durin was the only one who was not given a woman to leave offspring, as well as the opportunity to travel the world more freely, develop his philosophy and even create friendships with other races. On the other hand, he was the first dwarf technomancer, passionate about mathematics and machinery, unlike the other dwarf who are known as geomancers and pyromancers. Despite his great achievements and history, Durin's life came to an end. He today is regarded as a deity to the dwarfs, called the Celestial Paladin. His remains were buried in the mountains of Khazad-dûm in order to be the eternal guardian of the mountains. However, Durin was blessed by the gods and endowed with a power unique among his kind, the reincarnation. Therefore, Durin is not actually dead, rather he continues to exist in our world, but now in a foreign body. The other 16 dwarfs left offspring in their first home, north of Tibia, hidden under the Great Mountains, where they decided to found their own city called Berica. This city was divided into 3 different tribes, where they lived in peace and away from the world for hundreds of years. Until one day, after a dispute over religious differences, one of the tribes decided to leave the city to find a new home. The tribe that decided to leave Berica and dug through underground caves for years, thus reaching the main continent. There they created their own fortress in the mountains and named it Khazad-dûm, which translates into our language as High Mountains or the Big Old One. Years passed and the fights of the past began to be forgotten by this particular race. To this day, only the wisest dwarfs remember the origin of their race and treasure it as one of their greatest secrets. Due to the fact that the elves and dwarfs had the peculiar characteristic of living thousands of years, they realized that the war could mean their early death. They simply decided to get away from it, in order to live their long life without worries. For this reason, the gods learned from their mistakes and decided to create a new race, but this time this race would live much fewer years than the dwarfs and elves. In this way, they would live their short lives more intensely, and that limited time would serve as an incentive to counteract the war. Thus it came to pass that the elder gods created Bena the divine warrior. He was the first human being, and although his creators gave him powers that no other member of his race could match, he displayed many characteristics that clearly showed that he was human. Bena was sent to the lands that we know today as Dharma. There he lived thousands of years thanks to his gifts granted by the gods. Bena was a brave and cunning leader, leading his people from victory to victory, establishing a strong position in the land, and consolidating his rule by founding a dynasty. He married Kirana, the noblest of all women, and she bore him Elaine, who eventually mastered the arts of ranged fighting and the arcane art of magic. In the burning desert lands of Da'ama, he founded the first human settlement, a city on ruins abandoned by an ancient civilization, which he named Ankraman. This way, humanity extended its colonization to other parts of the continent, conquering territories where they created their great cities and their own kingdoms. Tibia seemed to bloom again. The humans, armed with strength and magic, gradually defeated Zathratha's minions and the evil that plagued the world at the time. The evil god watched his plans begin to sink into failure, and he did not sit idly by. He noticed the courage and conviction of humans, but the cunning god also managed to see the weakness of humanity, the ambition. Realizing that humans had the characteristic of living much less years than most races, he thought of taking this fact as an advantage and a reason for seduction for humans. Thus, he decided to instill the desire for immortality and eternal existence in humanity. Back then, Zathrath had previously created the god Urgith, the master of the undead. Urgith was a cruel god who strove to infuse unholy energy into the bodies of the dead, condemning them to a state that was neither life nor death. In this way, Zathrath devised an evil plan which would spread terror and disaster throughout the land of Tibia. Before humanity, when the God Wars was at its peak, the Bone Lords were among the most powerful races in Tibia. Their mighty cities, which were characterized by ominous dark pyramids, could be found all over the world. Constructed using their innate form of telekinesis, which allows their bodies to float in the air. However, they could not completely do without hands and arms to do their bidding. For this reason, they relied on another power innate to their race, the dark power of necromancy. As a result, they used a malevolent strategy. Every time they conquered an area, they turned their unfortunate victims into undead slaves. Thus, using legions of the undead as their shock troops, the Bone Lords went from victory to victory. It seemed that the Bone Lords were unstoppable, but in the end, they ended up sharing the same fate that most other races suffered during the wars. However, the Bone Lords, due to the fact that once they conquered the entire world, small areas of their civilization remained untouched. Many Bone Lords choose to hide beneath the surface of the world, fighting fierce underground wars to gain supremacy over the other races who fled the surface. The Bone Lords learned the bitter lessons of the wars that had brought them to the brink of extinction. They realized the limitations of their race and decided to work on their weaknesses. They discovered that they had relied too much on their intuitive powers in the past and decided to improve their innate powers through research and experiments. The dark art of necromancy seemed especially promising. This way, a group of Bone Lords focused all their efforts on improving their powers to dominate the undead. These efforts met with a first major success when the Bone Lords succeeded in creating a new type of undead minion, which was capable of acting on its own, without the direct control of a Bone Master. Unfortunately, these minions still lacked intelligence, and while unwaveringly loyal, they were of little use to their vile masters. And so it came to pass that the Bone Lords continued their hideous experiments on the living and the dead, but none of the hideous experiments produced the kind of atrocity they had in mind. After countless failed attempts, the Bone Lords gave up and were forced to abandon their experiments and hide underground. However, a group of Bone Lords were secretly enlightened by the knowledge of the god Urgith. They created small underground cities in places that had been inhabited by strong warriors in the past, concentrating on one of the strongest races back then. They created two bases of operations, on the Ice Islands and the Shattered Isle. They knew of the great disasters, wars, and magic involved in these islands, which they could take advantage of for their experiments. The Bone Lords took the corpses of powerful dead leaders who died in war, and brought them to a base hub known as Ghostland. There they built a temple based on dark energy, and began experimenting on dead bodies and stolen souls, including ascended elves, whose souls rested in the stars at the time. Through necromantic rituals and by sacrificing part of their physical self, they combined the souls with the living bodies of the human dynasties, giving life to new powerful undead creatures.